Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. So glad you can join us today. So today I have a review on the Wet n Wild Photofocus Stick Foundation. I have seen a lot of first impressions with this foundation, but I hadn't seen a lot of actual reviews or wear tests. Some people did a wear test the same day they used it, but to me it wasn't really a full review. Now granted, I'm sure some people did, but most people in my feed did not, and so I just kept seeing a lot of first impressions. So I thought I would take it, buy it for a couple of weeks, try it with a variety of primers, a variety of concealers, a variety of powders, and see what I really thought, take some wear test pictures, and let you see for yourself how I felt about it. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so before we kind of get into the foundation, I do want to tell you a little bit about my skin, my preferences, my concerns. So I have pretty much combination skin. I have larger pores. I do have some texture. Obviously, I'm getting to the age where I have some well, not fine lines, but I have lines. Some of them are fine, some of them are a little bit more prominent. So I obviously have some wrinkle concerns as I age. I typically prefer a more medium to full coverage foundation, although I do have days when I prefer a lighter foundation, and that usually seems to happen more in the summertime. Now, I do get pretty dry up at the top. I get pretty oily down here at the bottom. So it just kind of depends. So I do, like I said, have typically combination skin. On top of preferring a medium to full coverage foundation, I also prefer more of a satin matte finish. So I don't like it too matte. I definitely don't like it too dewy. I don't like it to look sparkly or shiny or anything like that. I kind of like that nice in between. So those are some of my preferences. My other preferences with primer. So with primers, I do typically prefer a more pore filling, texture clearing primer. As much as I would love to use hydrating primers, because again, I do get some dry areas, the problem is they don't work around my chin, and usually it just makes my foundation not work, and it doesn't really help with texture. And texture is kind of my main concern because I always want to at least look like I have a smoother finish. And I usually just use more of a moisturizer than on the areas that I need it. That's kind of my correction. I never wear luminous primers. I do have the Becca one, which I sometimes mix into my super matte foundations, but I don't really use it as a primer. I mostly just use it as a mixing medium. But I don't use a luminous primer and not use something else. I don't really use silicone primers that often, or those slippy clear primers very often. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And like I said, I don't really typically use hydrating primers. I've tried a few, I just haven't really found one that I've liked that have done enough for me. So those are some of my preferences. I'll also tell you all the primers that I've used with this foundation, how I've applied it, all that good stuff. So I've tried this with a variety of primers in my collection. I have tried it today. I am currently wearing this foundation, and I am currently wearing it, I'll try to get a little bit closer, with the Milani Prime and Correct primer. And I found that primer seems to work the best with this foundation. The least amount of issues with it. So that's kind of why I wore it today. I have tried it with my Holy Grail primer, which is the Smashbox Pore Minimizing Photo Finish Primer. I have used it with, obviously, the one I'm wearing, the Milani one. I have used it with the Soap & Glory One Heck of a Blot. I've used it with a primer that is a little bit more hydrating, the CoverGirl Ageless primer, something along those lines. And I actually also had a sample of the Peter Thomas Roth primer, which I've also tried it with. So we'll talk about kind of the differences. I've applied this both with a brush and with a sponge, so I've tried it both ways. I have used a variety of powders to set it with. I have used the Laura Mercier translucent powder. I've used the Maybelline Fit Me loose powder, as well as the pressed It Cosmetics Bye Bye Porous powder. And then I've used a variety of concealers with it to see how they blend in. I've used the Maybelline Age Rewind, I've used the Morphe Fluidity Concealer, I've used the Tarte Shape Tape, and I've used the Maybelline Age Rewind. So we can talk about all the differences. So out of all the primers that I've used with this foundation, I will say that this one's the best. So the Milani one has like a softness to it that is a little bit silicone-y, but it helps blur pores. So that's the one that I found works the best because it's soft enough, like it has enough slip and hydration that it works well with this particular foundation, and I'll explain that a little bit more, and it still helps my pores. Now, here is where I've had some difficulties. If this foundation doesn't have enough, like if the primer doesn't have enough moisture in it, or there's not enough moisture on your face, this is a struggle to blend. To me, this is a drier foundation stick, and I feel like that's not been the typical response people have gotten with this. I think it's a drier foundation stick. Maybe it's because the one I really like is more moisturizing this. I don't know. But this one to me is a little bit drier, which also makes it a little bit harder to blend. So what I've seen is that in order for me to get to a point where I really like it on my skin and it's blended really well, I need a primer that's got a little bit more slip and a little bit more moisture in it. So for example, the Soap & Glory one was a terrible mix with this foundation. So the Soap & Glory one has a little bit more tackiness to it. It kind of dries down a bit. It doesn't really have that same slip that the Milani one has, or the Touch & Soul one, because that's the other one I've tried with this. Touch & Soul and Milani are very similar, and they have a lot more slip to them. The One Heck of a Blot doesn't. My Smashbox Pore Minimizing one doesn't. Those really didn't work. It was very hard to blend this in with those drier primers, I found anyway. I don't think that they were the best combination. But here's my other problem. So in the area, especially, so with the hydrating primers, they worked better, especially in the area that I'm drier, obviously. However, in this area down here where I have more oil activity, my foundation didn't stay. It didn't stay with any of the primers I've tried, not even with my Holy Grail one. I can't get it to stay for a long wear time. Is it staying now? Yes, we'll talk about how long it's been on and also some of my chin issues even with it on. But I just can't get it to stay in a way that it looks nice for a long period of time right here where it's oily. So would I recommend this for oily skin? Probably not. I feel like oil kind of breaks it down, even with really good primers. So I don't really know how you'd fix that, I guess. Like I said, I do think that this is better with a foundation that's not super hydrating, but is kind of has a little bit more looseness to it, a little more slip. That to me is the primer that's going to work best with this foundation. Now again, I've tried it with both a brush and a sponge. I prefer the brush with it. I use the It Cosmetics like flat foundation brush with it, and it just, to me, I think that is the best way to get it blended into the skin. It's actually how I have it blended today. Now I have tried it with the sponge. The only thing I will say is coverage-wise, this is probably a light to medium coverage. So when I use it with a sponge, I find that it just shears it out too much, especially for my liking. So if you like a super sheer, then you may prefer the sponge. But for me personally, if I'm trying to save some coverage, I'm going to prefer the brush. That's just my preference. I think it blends a little bit easier with the brush. However, if it does start to dry down, then you do almost need the wetness of the sponge to kind of get it moving again. Now, when you're talking about coverage of this foundation, I will say it's a light to medium coverage. And this is why I'm going to say that. I have noticed that although it does give a pretty decent overview coverage, it doesn't really cover everything. I have had to put concealer on a lot of my acne. It definitely isn't covering some of the redness I have on my skin. And so, for example, I think you'll actually be able to see it on camera. I have a lot of redness like right here in my cheek. That's not blush. That's my cheek. My blush is like here. See this like more softer blended in area? I don't know if you can see. This is blush. This red circle right here, that is my redness. I have used 2 layers of this to try to cover that up as best I can, and obviously you still see it through. My redness there bothers me because I do think it kind of makes it look like I put on patchy blush, so it's not my favorite place to not have coverage. Whereas on my forehead, you might be able to see it. There's some redness here as well. I don't really mind when my forehead looks a little bit more red, but again, on my cheeks, I'm not a big fan of it. So although I do think that this layers well on top of itself, I don't really think it gives you that much more coverage. So if you're really looking for a coverage stick foundation, this is not for you. This is definitely going to be for people who are not really needing a lot to correct, who just kind of want to put something on and kind of just be okay. So maybe you have less skin imperfections. You know, I think this would be great for somebody with very youthful skin that doesn't have a lot of acne, because it would be quick, it would be a light-ish coverage, and they would potentially have better skin. So to me, that's more how it is. Now, if you have great skin, this also may be really good for you. I don't have great skin, so it needs a little bit more work. Now, the concealers that I've tried with this, today I'm currently wearing the Maybelline Age Rewind concealer. However, I did not use a color corrector. So I kind of want to show you what it looks like on. So that's going to be my eye area. All of the concealers that I've tried, the Maybelline, the Tarte Shape Tape, and the Ulta Full Coverage Concealer, have all blended in fine. There hasn't been an issue with them blending. The only one that's been a little bit tricky to blend into my foundation is the Morphe Fluidity Concealer. And personally, I think it's because it's a little bit more of a drier formula. Kind of like with the primer, this foundation doesn't seem to mix well with drier formula products. To me, the Morphe concealer, it just dries down too fast. And so because this doesn't blend well with them, it takes a little bit more work. So in order to get that to blend into this, I really had to use a wetter makeup sponge to make that happen a little bit, or I had to be really quick with it. That was really the only issue I had. So if you have a drier concealer, again, that might not be the best concealer pair with this. All the rest of my concealers worked perfectly fine though. Then when you're talking about powders on top of this, I felt it was necessary to set. I don't set all of my foundations all over. I always set my under eye area. I always set my chin. I always set around my nose. And I do set just because I do have deeper lines across my forehead, mostly just to keep the foundation from settling in. So I use a light dusting up here, around here. But I typically never set this area of my face or around my temple unless it's a very wet foundation and it feels tacky, yada yada. Well, this one, it does have a bit of a tackiness to it, which I wasn't really expecting because it doesn't really seem that hydrating. Yet it still felt kind of wet, which I was a little shocked on. So I did always feel the need to set it. Also with that, because of the coverage, I also felt that I needed something to kind of help cover some things because it was such a light to medium coverage. Now, I used today, because I really wanted you to be able to see what it does and doesn't cover, I used my Laura Mercier today because to me that doesn't really add coverage, it more just sets everything. So again, so that way you could see a little bit more, and I'll show you my chin, a little bit more of how it peeks through to the skin. So I kind of just set it to set it, not really to cover anything. When I use my Maybelline Fit Me, that one has more of a color. It's a little bit thicker than the Laura Mercier, and it does provide more coverage. That is what I typically have been using with this, just to kind of control some of the oil, to set things a little bit better. Today, like I said, I really wanted you to see what the coverage was and how it really looks without other products masking it, and that's why I went with the Laura Mercier. For me, I actually feel like the Maybelline Fit Me works better, and I feel like this may even be better with a foundation that's gonna add coverage if you want more coverage. I did also use it with the Bye Bye Pores and didn't really notice a difference. It's not really one of my favorite powders though, so maybe that's why. So those are all the products I used with it. I did also set it today, like with a setting spray. I used the MAC Fix Plus, and that would really be the only other thing. And this picture is going to be when I first apply this foundation. It's going to be before I put on concealer. It's going to be just post primer basically. It's going to be before I put on any other products. It's literally going to be primer, foundation. So that way you can see immediately what it looks like when it is first applied, and I will go ahead and show that to you now. Early in the morning. I know the lighting's not great, but I also want to show you, I've now had this on about 3 hours, what it looks like at the 3-hour mark. So kind of not really my middle of the day, but I know it's some middle of the days for some. And I'm going to kind of zoom as close as I can get to the camera so you can see. So what I've noticed with this, one, my acne is already coming out. My chin already looks like it's separating. You know, it kind of sinks into my smile lines more than other foundations that I've used. And I also noticed it's starting to build up around my nose. It's almost completely already worn off my nose. And you can even see the redness from my forehead coming through. And I don't necessarily know that my cheeks gotten any better. So in that regard, this is the 3-hour mark. I typically wear foundations 10 to 12 hours. I mean, I'm just saying. So I'm also going to post a picture of what this looks like at the very end of the day. So now you can kind of see pre, during, and post all the different aspects of the day with the Wet n Wild Stick Foundation. It kind of gives you an idea of how it wears throughout the day. Now again, the first photo is going to be pre-concealer, pre-powder. I think I did maybe put powder on that one. Now I have to think about it. This is going to be completely done face after 3 hours. That one's going to be completely done face at the end of the day. So you can really see how it's wearing. Now, if you're wondering, well, you don't really like light to medium coverage foundations, of course you're not going to like this. Well, kind of. I do actually like some of them. So a couple of the lighter to medium foundations that I do really enjoy, one of them, one of my all-time favorites, is the Maybelline Dream Mousse BB Cream. That stuff is amazing. My skin always looks so nice afterwards. It's beautiful. Strongly recommend it. I also really like, also a stick foundation, the Ulta Moisturizing Stick Foundation. It lasts way longer to me than this, and it's creamier. So it doesn't stick to dry patches, and it still stays on my chin, and it's more moisturizing. So those are both much lighter foundations. I am currently enjoying the Misha BB cream. I like the It Cosmetics CC cream, and honestly, I think that's a little bit more full coverage than this. And that one I kind of blend out, like I blend down, so I'm not putting as much on. And I have used the regular Photo Finish foundation before. I've used it. I bought it. I used it up. I actually liked that more than the stick foundation. And I never repurchased that. And part of the reason why I didn't repurchase it is I just couldn't get past the smell. The smell on that foundation smells like turpentine. And I just kept thinking, if it smells this bad, is it really great for my face? I know that's weird because I know fragrance is supposed to be bad for your face, but that one smelled so strongly of chemicals, in my opinion, that I just never felt comfortable putting it on. But I do think that that one worked better than this one. This one kind of smells plasticky. Like it kind of smells like plastic, which is a little bit weird. And I'll also swatch it for you. I'm in the shade Soft Ivory, so it does swatch pretty creamy. But I don't know, something on my face, it just struggled with blending a little bit. And I'll blend it with my finger. I don't know how well you can see because obviously it's more of a shade match. Let me see if I can get close enough. See how you can still see the texture through? You can still see my vein through it. Like, it's not really giving you coverage. So again, if you prefer a light coverage, you may like this. I would say if you have pretty normal skin, looking for a light coverage foundation, this may be your ballpark. If you are looking for definitely high coverage, this is not for you. It's not for me because of that. Will I continue to use this up? Yes, I will probably use it on my lighter foundation days. Now, I think Wet n Wild has some fantastic products. I am a sucker for their lip products. Could buy their whole line and be happy. I actually really like their Photo Finish pressed powder. That's also a really good one. So I do really like Wet n Wild stuff, but to me, this is just kind of a miss, and I won't be repurchasing it. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope I gave you all the information you are looking for in this video. If there's anything you would love to see in a review video, whether it's products or something you wish that I would talk about when thinking about product reviews, please list them down in the comments below, and can't wait to see you next time. Bye.